Well, hello everybody, and thank you so much for tuning in to this video. This video is going to be all about being a master electrician. I was thinking a lot about, some of my students, some of my classmates out at Fredonia, and I really got thinking about how they're going to be missing some shared experiences, and specifically some shared learning experiences. One of those things being is that some of these students are going to be missing out on an opportunity to be a master electrician for the first time, or being an assistant master electrician for the first time, maybe even a second time. And I understand that they did just recently switch over to a head electrician. So, this video is really geared towards, master electrician, head electrician, whatever the title might be in your area. And it's, really to give you an overview of what you should be doing in this position. I've had this talk with a few people out of Fredonia, and I really think it has helped, just even getting an overview of what should be going on. And so I really hope this does help whoever is watching this. If you are somebody who's going to be a master electrician or a head electrician very soon, or if you're somebody who's starting out who may be aspiring to this position, or if you are a master electrician, maybe this can help you clean up a few things you do. This is really to help. One thing I do want to mention is that this video is going to be mainly based off of a theater that has a proscenium and has a fly space. I do have a few notes in here about if you're working in a black box theater, but again, this mainly deals with a setup as if it was a proscenium theater. So I really do hope you guys enjoy. This is probably going to be a long video of me just talking at you guys. And then I'll show a little bit on screen about some of the systems I've been using and some of the things I've learned to do that have really helped me out, that'll hopefully help you guys as well. I really hope, again, you guys enjoy this video, and we'll just dive right in. So the first thing to really note is what exactly a master electrician does. Master electrician, or ME, is really here to ensure that the lighting designer's plot is up and running. They are in charge of implementing the designer's plot. So that's really what you're going to be doing as an ME. Really the first step when you're assigned an ME position, or when you decide to become a master electrician, you're hired or what have you, first thing you should really do is get a nice binder. And that binder can either be a 1.5 inch or a 2-inch binder, because there's going to be a lot of paperwork in there. And the next thing you're going to want to do is get a clean notebook. A lot of times what I do with my binders, what I would do is I would make a binder cover. It would have the title of the show, and then it would have my electrics crew on it. So it would have title of the show, and then it would have me as master electrician, and then my AMEs if I had any, and so on and so forth. The next thing you're going to want to do is get a clean notebook. This binder is going to become your Bible. It's what you live and breathe for the next few weeks, months, what have you, as the show is going on. You should always have that binder with you, and you should always have that notebook with you, especially during calls, so you can take notes during it. All of the paperwork you get from the lighting designer is going to go into this binder. So again, it's very important to get this binder, get it early, and get it organized. You're going to want to print off all the paperwork you get from your LD. They will most likely give you a channel hookup, an instrument schedule, a color schedule, a gobo schedule if you have it, if you need it. It's very, again, I can't stress it enough how important it is to organize all of this and get it in and sorted as quickly as possible. Um, you're probably going to want to start making sign-in sheets. What I do for all of my paperwork that I use on my computer is I make a Google Drive folder, um, and then I make all of my sheets in sheets. I have a sign-in sheet template that I use, that I make, that I just print off, and then I fill in the date. All of my weight calculations I do in sheets. Um, it's very accessible, and it's very easy to share amongst people. The whole design team usually has a folder, and then I make my own folder in the lighting designers folder. Again, just so everything's there, just so everything is very easily accessible. Um, Next thing you're going to want to do, once you print everything off, don't forget to print off a plot. Printing off a plot is important. You want to make sure it's printed off on the correct size paper, and that is going to be a 36 by 48 sheet of paper. It is going to be large, very large. If you have a plotter, again, get it printed off on the right size. If you only have a regular printer, you can probably get away with printing it on 11 by 17. Just make sure it's scaled down correctly to fit, and hopefully you'll be able to get an accurate count of everything from there. If you can't print it out at home, I would suggest finding a way to, because you're going to need it when it comes to focus. But for the time being, you could get away with just using it in a PDF or on the Vectorworks file on your laptop or your home workstation. The next thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to start getting an instrument inventory. Take a look at the plot, get a count of what instruments are used and how many of each instrument are used. At Fredonia, what you're going to want to do as soon as possible is fill out the inventory given to you by the space managers. It's either going to be Taylor or Eric, or it's someone who's in charge of the space or in charge of the lighting instruments themselves. Each place is going to be different. At Fredonia, we had people who were in charge of the space on a day-to-day basis and in charge of general maintenance. So again, at Fred, you want to make sure and fill that out as soon as possible, or any place you have an inventory sheet to fill out, get it filled out as soon as possible and get it to those people who are in charge of the spaces or the equipment itself. Next thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to start a gel count and a gel inventory. You're going to want to use the color schedule from the paperwork you got from the LD. A color schedule sorts out all of the colors that are used in the show, and it sorts it by color. So on one page, it'll have all of the R36 that's used in the show, and it'll show each and every instrument that it's used in. And then on another page, it'll have all of your R26 in each instrument that's used. From there, you're going to want to keep track of what's used for what specific instrument. And then you're going to want to go to your gel inventory, wherever that might be, and take count of what is in stock in terms of cuts and then what you actually need. For this, oftentimes, if you're lucky, you can cut down bigger cuts of gel. Like if you need some 6 1/4 and you only have 7 1/2, you can cut down those 7 1/2. Also please make sure and take count of how many sheets you have. So from there, you'll sort of gel order. What I like to do is I like to make a spreadsheet on sheets that I can show you later. And in that, I have all of my gels. I have what instruments they're going to be used in. I have how many we need. I have the inventory we have. And then I have how many cuts we need and how many sheets are needed. So that way, everything's in that one sheet. Everything's nice and consolidated. And then you're going to want to make sure and get that to your managing producer or whomever it is. Get that into that person as soon as possible. I know out of Fredonia, it's going to be the lighting professor. So just get that in as soon as possible. It's very important. Next thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to figure out your addresses for all of your intelligent fixtures. There's a really neat way to do this. I'll show you how to do it, but I'll just talk about it real quick. On the ETC software, you can do what's called Fast Patch, where you just plug in all of your channels and then you select the type they're going to be, if they're all going to be the same type, and then you plug in the starting address and the starting universe, and then the program will actually populate every single address for that given block of channels. So again, I'll show you how to do that later, but just to get through the steps for right now, we're going to focus on this. Once you have your addresses done, you should also figure out power for your intelligence if you have intelligence. It's very important to figure this out. You need to know how many relays you're going to need if you have relays, or if you need to pull from the wall, or if you need distro boxes, whatever you might need. Out at Fredonia, we have relays that we insert into our dimming system, so you need to make sure and figure out how many relays you're going to need. And relays, of course, are basically power switches that you control with the console, and you tell them when to send power and when not to send power. So you need to make sure and figure out how many relays you need. The best way to do that is to look up the data sheets for all of the instruments you're using. I know specifically with the Chevet Colorado Zoom Tours, they recommend only 8 fixtures be daisy chained together. So it's very important you look that up, because if you have 16 Colorados on one electric, you're going to need 2 relays. Another thing that can get pretty confusing is the relays themselves come in 2 modules, 2 slots, if you will, to a module. So when you look at a dimmer rack, each module takes up 2 circuits. I know this can be very confusing just to talk about, but if you have seen a dimmer rack, or you have access to one, or if you even just look it up, you can see exactly what I'm talking about, and it's very important to denote how many of the relay modules you're going to need. So technically, if you do have only 16 Colorados on an electric, you're going to need 1 relay module, but that does take up 2 circuits. So just something to keep in mind. If you have movers, make sure to check out how many movers you can twofer together, if you can twofer any together. It's very important to check all of this out beforehand. And, of course, this is all before hang, so there are a lot of steps to go through even before hang starts. So once you figure out power, once you figure out addresses, once you figure out inventory and gel count, you're going to want to go to start prepping. Now this is where the proscenium and black box are going to differ just a little bit, but I will go over black box notes real quick. If you are working in, say for example, the Bartlett at Fredonia, if any of my Fredonia peeps are watching this, you know exactly what I'm talking about. When you're working in a black box theater, you need to make a circuit plot for the space. And a circuit plot is just a light plot that has lines drawn on it that show you the cable path from the fixture itself to the actual circuit. So it's very important to get that done as well, because in a black box theater, in the Bartlett specifically, we have very few dimmers, so we have to make sure everything is plotted out exactly just so we can keep things clean. In a proscenium space, you're going to start calculating the weights for all of the electrics you're using. I have spreadsheets that have formulas written in them to do all of that work for me, and I'll show you guys how to make those if you end up wanting to make spreadsheets like this. You don't have to. Everything you do, the way you do this is up to you, but these are, very helpful steps. So again, you're either doing your circuit plot or you're doing your weights for all of your electrics. Um, the next thing you're going to want to do is start prepping the space, and getting ready for your hang day and making sure you have a set schedule of what's going to be going on. Um, in terms of a hang and making things easier, there are so many different ways that you can streamline things for hang. The most important thing for hang is that you're getting things done in a timely manner and as quickly as possible. Um, I have seen things done a multitude of ways, and I'm sure there are ideas that I haven't even thought of or even seen that you can make things more streamlined. Um, I'm going to talk about what I've seen and also what I've done, just because it's what I've done and what I like to do. So for a black box theater, you want to, first of all, the big thing is to double check what ladders you can use in the space, if you have any genie lifts that you can use, what genie lifts you can use. And you want to make sure all of your powered lifts are charged before the day of, and you want to make sure they're fully charged for the day. In Fredonia, with our grid system that we have in our Bartlett, we print off labels. We have one side all letters, and then the next side we have all numbers. So we can pinpoint exactly where to hang our lights. So if you do that kind of thing, or if you want to implement that, make sure you print that out on pieces of paper. Make sure your letters and numbers are big and make sure they're legible. I have seen this done. I have not done it myself, but if you want to, you can print off tags that have the coordinates for each instrument and place them on the instrument themselves. So if you have a source 4 and it goes on, pipe A, but it crosses with pipe J or what have you, or if it's in between pipes 2 and 3 on pipe A, if you want to list that out some way on a tag, go right ahead. Whatever system you might want to make up for that, go ahead. I've also seen it done, and I have done myself, where you just hand out 1/4 inch plots on 11 by 17 or 8.5 by 11, and you give one to a person and you say, this quadrant is yours. Or you print off just that quadrant in a viewport and you say, this quadrant is yours, go hang it, and so on and so forth. Typically, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to get all the instruments in the air first, then you can start cabling. And again, that's just to, speed things along. It's a lot faster if you focus on one thing first, getting that one thing done over and over and over again, and then you can move on to the next task. So that's for black box, whatever system you want to utilize there. For proscenium, what I always did was I made hang cards, which are pieces of foam core that have a viewported image of the electric, printed out, cut out, and then pasted on that foam core. And then I have keys on the back of the foam core so you can easily identify each fixture and where it goes. If you're going to do this, make sure you have a ruler on the hang card. Make sure you have stage left and stage right clearly marked, and make sure you have a center line clearly marked. That's all very important to have on there. And you can do all of that in Vectorworks. And as we go along, I'll be showing you guys a few tips and tricks, a few things that I did on the Vectorworks files as we go along. I have also seen it done where the electrics themselves are marked out with soapstone, with a little line, and they say like source 4 36 degree, or it's a line and it says Chevet, Colorado, or what have you. Whatever goes in that spot is just marked out with that soapstone. I think that's a great idea too. I just preferred the hang cards. It's all about what you want to do. It's all about trying to make this go as quickly as possible. I would say no matter what you do, you should have your instruments sorted out in a specific area, like, stage right in the wings if you have enough room. No matter where the fixtures are sorted out, make sure you have clear labels above each grouping. So you have all of your 26 degrees over here, you have all of your 50 degrees over here, and again, it's a nice clear label on the, excuse me, it's a nice clear label above the group of sorted out lights themselves. So the next thing that's going to come up after you have all of your prep all set is the actual hang day. What I like to do is I like to go into the space a little earlier before our assigned time. And I like to just prep everything in the space, make sure everything's the way I want it, so that we're ready to go. During hang, you, the master electrician, the head electrician, again, whatever your title might be, you are in charge of hang. So you are in charge of the crew that's going to be there for the day, that's going to work. Make sure that you are available at all times to answer any questions. You are most likely going to be running the rail when it comes to weighting the electrics. If you have an underclassman who is preparing to be a master electrician, you might trade off those duties. It all depends on what's going on and what your crew looks like. Honestly, one tip I can give to make things go faster is try to work on 2 electrics at a time, so you can keep moving, try to get ahead of the game. Your crews up in the grid, if you have enough people for 2 teams up in the grid to be waiting, then great. It'll help things go faster if you get working on both electrics and get both grid teams working. The number one thing is to make sure you have your binder and your notebook with you at all times. You're going to want your notebook open so you can take notes as needed. Have a pen with you. You need to be able to take notes on the spot whenever notes are given to you. Don't say I'll remember it, because you most likely won't. And it's no offense to anybody who might be watching this. It's happened to me. It's happened to everybody, I'm sure. Write the note down as soon as you get it. If you don't have your notebook, put it down on your phone. Please write it down as soon as you get the note. Another thing you're going to want to be doing is you want to keep crews moving as much as possible. You don't want a group of people just standing around doing nothing. Keep people moving, and the more you keep people moving, the faster this call will go, and the more work you can actually get done. At the end of the day, whether it be day 1, day 2, day 3, whatever it is of hang, you want to do a full system ring out, and that's just making sure everything turns on. If you have LEDs, making sure they change color, make sure they change to the right color. Your movers move around and change gobos and all that. You want to make sure all of that is working properly. Before the day you come in for focus, you want to make sure and drop color that has been sorted out beforehand. One thing I did forget to mention is if you're hanging, when you are hanging, you want to actually get all of your instruments hung first, test the weight with that, and then start all of your cabling. So if you are when you're working with intelligence, again, get them on first, and then once you have it weighted, you're going to start cabling everything. Cable with data, cable with power. Before you go in for the day of hang, you should be switching out your relays that you figured out beforehand in your dimmer rack, so that way when you plug stuff in and you start patching, that way you can make sure everything turns on, and make sure you won't hurt anything when you do turn those fixtures on with that relay. It's very important to use relays with your intelligence. You don't want to put it on a dimmer because it can hurt the intelligence themselves. Another thing I forgot to mention, is that as you're going through your hang, you want to have somebody up at the board who is patching. I've seen it done where the LD will actually patch because they are an upperclassman and they know how to program quickly, so they can get patch done fairly quickly. And again, once everything's hung and once everything's patched, whether that be on the first, second, or third day of hang, whatever it may be, you want to make sure and do a full system ring out. And then again, before the day of focus, you want to come in and you want to drop the color. If you have time at the end of hang day 2 or 3, before or after a ring out, drop your color then, just to make sure it's in there. So next comes focus. And focus is exactly as it sounds, where you and your crew come in and you start focusing the plot itself. Before you start, before the assigned start time of focus, again, I like to go in well beforehand so I can get everything sorted out and laid out exactly the way I want it. You're going to want your plot laid out in a nice open workspace. You're going to want to run a channel check to make sure everything's working. You should confer with the scenic team and the technical direction team to make sure all the borders are in the right place. You want to talk to the technical direction team if there's anything you shouldn't walk on or go near or even touch. Do your best to figure out who's going to be at focus by just sending out emails like, hey, are you coming to focus? Let me know if you're not coming to focus. And before you start the day, you want to assign crews based on who's going to be there to the best of your ability. You know, I understand it's sometimes hard to do that because you don't hear back from people, but you do. You know, if you have an assigned crew, they should be there, and if they told you they won't be there, then, you know, that's fine. But in academia, you know that you're probably going to have your electrics major, so you can definitely assign them to a crew. The different positions are what I have coined as a focusee. They're either an upperclassman, a professor, or the designer or designers. They're going to be on stage actually looking at the light and telling the focuser where to point it. And again, a focuser is typically an underclassman or a crew member who has had training. And they're going to be moving the light around according to the LD or the professor. If I flop those two terms, then oh well. You're going to have ladder bases, and those are people who are just there to base a ladder as people go up and work on it. Anybody can be a base, but just be mindful of your crew. Honestly, you're going to want an underclassman to be a base, or you know, you're going to want an upperclassman to be a base, so you can get other people more experience. You know, you just be mindful of who's basing those ladders. It's something to really be mindful of. You're going to have a board op. And that board op is someone who can run the board and can call up channels when they're called for. And then you're going to have someone running plot or multiple people running plot. And this person or people will be staring at the plot that you have printed out and laid out on your nice workspace, and they're going to be keeping track of what lights have been focused already. Again, you are in charge of crews for this day. So you're going to want to make sure that you're available to talk to people and tell people where to go and what to do and answer any questions anybody may have. At the end of focus, sometime before queuing, I would say sometime before queuing as soon as possible, print off another plot. Because the plot you used for focus is going to be a little messy. There's going to be all sorts of writing on it. So you want to make sure and print off a nice clean plot that you can work from should you need it to again. Next comes queuing. And like I've said with most other days, you are in charge of your crew for that day. Again, what I like to do is I like to get in the space early so I can organize it and make sure everything's working. You want to do a channel check before the day starts, make sure everything works, and fix anything that you might have to. Again, you're going to want to talk to Scenic and the technical direction team about if you can move something, if you cannot move something, if there is somewhere on set you shouldn't be, where it is safe to be on set. Um, Make sure all of the scenic elements are where they should be for the start of the show, and of course, that is all after conferring with the scenic and TD team. Um, Make sure everybody's signed in, make sure you have crews assigned to where they should be. Um, Honestly, as an ME, you're there again to answer questions and lead the crew. Um, if you're in academia and you want to sit right next to the board and do some homework, go right ahead. If the if some of the higher ups have decided that for a day you're going to be the board op to get you more experience, then so be it. I think that's fine. Everybody in electric should have as much experience running a board as possible, especially programming a board, excuse me, because you want to be as fast as you can when you are programming during queuing and during tech. So again, if you get the chance and you just want to sit near the board and observe the process, then fine. You just need to be as available as possible to run and do something if you have to, or if you need a crew to do something. With all of these, you want to make sure that, honestly, in my opinion, and some people may differ, that you want to be the last person who has to run and do something. Just because you need to be there to take notes and you need to make sure everything is going properly. After queuing is tech. And obviously, in between hang and focus and queuing and tech, you're working on any notes that have to be done, whether it be as simple as a lamp needs changing or a focus note or whatever it may be. Maybe you're working on some practicals. Practicals are another thing I'm not getting into in this video, but they are out there. They do pop up in shows. And if you have practicals in your show, then you're going to need to be able to work on them on those off days. So during tech, on the day of your tech rehearsals, you're making sure everything on your side of the tech world is working okay. You're doing a channel check at the assigned time assigned by the stage manager. You're doing a blackout check at the assigned time. You're taking notes during rehearsals, and you're doing them in a timely manner. Typically during these, you are just sitting next to the board or behind the board and you're taking notes and you're observing the process. One of the most important things I can say right now for the tech process is learn how to prioritize notes and figure out what has to be done early and what can kind of take a back seat and not have to worry about getting done. You're going to need to work after rehearsal and during breaks to get stuff done as soon as possible, and honestly to avoid some early mornings in academia. I understand it has to be done. If you need to come in on an early morning call, then flip and do it. You need to get the notes done. They need to be done before the next rehearsal. If you get notes on a Monday night or a Monday afternoon, they need to be finished before that next Tuesday rehearsal. Those high priority notes, those big notes that should be done. Again, get them work during quick breaks. Take a quick break and then go punch out a few small notes. Or take a quick break after rehearsal, take a quick water break or a bathroom break, and then get them done after rehearsal. Me as a designer, I'm really bad about not doing my queuing notes the night I get them. And it has hurt me before because I don't remember what the note should be or what the heck I'm trying to say. So, get those notes done as soon as possible so they're fresher in your mind. It is very important to do that. Your mind will fail you, especially when you need it the most. Again, in between all of these days, you're doing your notes and you're just getting them done in a timely manner and making sure everything's all set for the next night. When it comes to show calls, you're in charge. It's your baby now, making sure everything's working. You don't have the designers there anymore, obviously. So you're still doing your channel check and your blackout check according to the schedules. You're changing out lamps as needed. You're fixing problem as needed beforehand. Typically during the show in academia, um, you're on call in the building somewhere, so you can run down and help with anything that might need attending to, whether it be a blown lamp during the show or, God forbid, a board problem. I have had a few issues as an ME where I've had to step in, and they are not fun. They're not fun. You pray everything goes correctly, but it doesn't often. um, so if you do have a problem, you're just trying to get it done as quickly as possible and as quietly as possible, and not trying to cause a ruckus for the people on stage and the audience. Once the show has run, it is time for strike. And with strike, like with everything else I have mentioned, you're in charge of facilitating the strike and your crews. You want strike to go as easily as possible, and you want it to be done in a timely manner. So you want to make sure and talk to the other department heads about their strike schedule and your strike schedule, so you can come together in a gun and again get it done in a timely manner and get it done as quickly and as efficiently as possible. Um, again, you're in charge of the crews, what they're doing, and you are delegating as needed. Me as a master electrician, one of my biggest tips to you guys just starting out, if you're starting out, is learn how to delegate. I had a big issue with that when I was master electrician my first time. I had a big thing about making sure I did everything myself. And that can hurt because you need to be available for notes and for what have you. Um, Being an ME is a lot of responsibility, but it can be a lot of fun. The biggest thing I can say is to plan. Plan, plan, plan. One of the things I heard when I was in the Boy Scouts from one of my leaders is the 7 P's. Proper prior planning prevents piss poor performance. And it's very, very important to plan properly prior to your calls to prevent some less than par performance. So, if anybody watching this is out at Fredonia right now, and you have an ME coming up, feel free to contact me. If any of y'all watching this might be a master electrician in the future, or you're thinking about it, feel free to contact me. Throw some ideas my way if you are thinking about doing this, that, and the other. I'd be more than happy to give any advice if anybody out there is looking to just say, hey, how about this? Or, talk about anything. I'm more than willing to talk to anybody about any of this, especially my Fredonia friends. So I do hope this first part of the video has been helpful. I hope you have learned a few good things about how to be a master electrician. So I'm going to turn it over to some on-screen things, and we'll take it from there. So here we go with a few on-screen tips and tricks.
So before we dive into the process of showing you guys a few tips and tricks, I did want to show you guys the plot that I will be basing everything off of, just so you can get a better idea of what's going on, and just really be able to visualize what we're working with here. So this is the plot to the Grapes of Wrath that I used at Suna Fredonia. This is my final main stage design at Fredonia. This is the plot that I used. We are currently looking at the front of house view And you can see here, I also have on this view, um, I have my booms that I use throughout the show, and then I have my box booms that I used with different textures and different systems as I needed them. Um, Also on here, I have my work and house light channel, and I also have my LED and mover power, and then I have any practicals that I wanted to use throughout this. Um, One quick note about this video, I do not mention anything about practicals, but it is very important that you keep those in mind as you're going through your ME position or head electrician position, because you are probably going to have practicals, and you need to make sure those are getting done as well, so they are ready for the show and ready to be used during those technical rehearsals. This show in particular had quite a few practicals, so my ME was working on them pretty much round clock, and he honestly did such a beautiful, fantastic job on this show. Um, so this is the front of house plot, and then we come over here to my on-stage plot, and you can see my different electrics. I used an AP. I used the AP truss that we had in the space, and then I used the first through our fifth electric, and then I had a ground row as well for our to make some really nice two-tone psych looks, and then I had a hazer that we made use of, and so again, just to give you a better sense of what we're working with as we go through this. Um, and just, I'm trying to honestly stall so you guys can really appreciate this plot. Not because it was, not because of the size of it, but just so you guys can again soak it in and get a good understanding of what the plot is that we're working with for this particular ME. So what I have up on my screen here is a typical uh, inventory sheet that I would create for my shows when I was the master electrician. And it's a very simple setup. What I would do is I would grab the color schedule from the paperwork that I was given, and I would go through the table of contents and I would just see what gels we're using. And I would list that all out in an Excel sheet, or on Google Sheets. I'm a big proponent for using Google Docs, so that way everything's online. That way everything is very accessible. But unfortunately, um, obviously you can do it on Excel and then upload it to Google Drive. That way you have it anywhere. I just think at times it's a little easier to be doing things on sheets. Unfortunately, with the way I record things, I can't demonstrate on sheets. However, um, the similarity between uh, sheets and Excel is there's no difference. I should say there's barely any difference between the two. So it's, what you learn in Excel, you can apply to Sheets and vice versa. So here I have my sample Grapes of Wrath gel count, and I went through and I already did a few of these cuts, and I listed them out. So what I would do is in my color schedule, I would go through and I would look at each gel on the color schedule, and it would list out each type of instrument that it would be used in. And then I would record each sheet here in this sheet. And as you can see, for R36, for 6 1/4 cut frames, I would need 22. That's by counting on the color schedule, and then I would go to my gel inventory and I would count and see how many sheets or cuts we had in stock. And when I did this counting, we had 10, which means, of course, I need 12 cuts of R36 at 6 1/4. And because of that, I know we need one sheet of R36 to be ordered. And then I went through and I did the same thing for each color after that. Then when we got down here to GAM 364, we had 15 uh, instruments that would need it that need a 6 1/4 cut, and then we actually have 10 that would need a 7 1/2 cut. So in my inventory, we have 4 cuts of 6 1/4. So we need uh, excuse me, my math is incorrect there. Um, so we would need 11 cuts of excuse me, um, 6 1/4, and then for the 7 1/2 frames, we would need 5 cuts because of what we have in inventory and what we need. Um, so something to keep in mind as you're going through all of your gel inventory and your gel counting is obviously different gels, different size barrels take different size gel frames. Um, your source 4, 19 degree, 26, 36, and 15, 50 degree are all going to take 6 1/4 frames. And your source 4 juniors, if you use any of those, are going to take those as well. Um, 14 degrees, 90 degrees, a source 4 par, Fresnels, par 56s if you end up using any of those anymore, and they're going to take 7 1/2 inch gel frames. And then if you end up using any par 64s anywhere, they're going to end up taking 10-inch frames. If you use source for 10 degrees like we do, we use them for spotlights, and sometimes we use them as CYAs. Those take 12-inch cuts. And then if you use a 5 degree at all, they take 14-inch cuts. And that 14-inch cut is basically a whole sheet of gel. So again, just something to keep in mind as you're going through all of your gel inventories. If you don't know all of those sizes by heart, definitely take that down because it is very important that you get all of those sizes correct. And of course, there is a certain way to cut your gels when you're cutting these for the first time to make sure that you get as much as possible. Um, you want to make sure and cut them lengthwise first, so that way you can get as much gel out of these sheets as possible.
So, what I'm going to show you now is how to go through a process that I originally called Fast Patch. And this is a very handy little tool that I like to use a lot, especially when I was out at school. I did this a lot, and I do it a lot even now as I'm freelancing when I have to be my own kind of master electrician. So I have opened a completely new show file on my ETC offline editor. And this will work with pretty much any ETC software out there. It's a great feature. It's a great program to have at your disposal. It's free to download. If you don't have it and you're a lighting enthusiast like I am, please go do so. You can learn a lot just by playing around on these things. So anyway, the first thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to go into Patch, and the keyboard shortcut on the offline editor is Alt AA. Then you see we have our patch screen here. Um, my I do have two monitors here, so my channels are on my second screen. So you can't see them right now, but the more important screen is what I have highlighted. So let's say, just for sake of ease, that channels 1 through 10 are going to be an intelligent fixture. And this will, of course, work with any range of channels that you're going to have. I'll show you a couple uh, ways, a couple different instruments here. So we're going to start with 1 through 10.
And we're going to start in the second universe. So we'll go 2 slash, and we'll make it easy. We'll just go 2/1. So once we have that in our command line, we go over here to type, and then we go to manufacturer, and I'm going to make these some Altman Phoenixes. So we click on Altman here, and then we find the Phoenix that we are using in our plot. And the ones we typically use are the Phoenix ERS, and we have we do the Phoenix LED profile, and we typically have them in 16-bit mode. So you can't see it here, but on the second screen, it went through and it patched everything um, in in line. So let me see if I can pull this up on here so you can actually see it. There we are. So now we have Phoenixes on channel 1 through 10, and we have all of the addresses that we need. We see that channel 1 is address 1, and so on and so forth down the line. So if you were, you're doing this before you start your hang, you can just write this out, or you can type it out into Google Sheets, then you can print it out for the day of when you start addressing. Let's patch one more just for the heck of it. So we'll go 21 through 27 at 3 slash. We'll put them in the third universe. And we'll start with where we ended on this guy. So this last Phoenix in line is address 80. Um, and actually, that doesn't matter because in the third universe, but now it will because we're going to go back into the second universe. So we'll say 2/81, and we'll say type, and we'll make this one an elation. Actually, we'll make it a Chevet. We'll go with a Maverick MK2. These are a nice moving light that I just was introduced to over the past couple months as I was working in Fredonia at the high school. So we want a Chevet Maverick MK2, and we're going to go with the profile. And we want the 54 channel because typically you want these in the largest profile so you can have the most amount of features with them. And as with the Phoenixes, that went through and it patched in everything that you need. It knows exactly how many addresses this takes up, and it knows where to start and where to end. If you were to go through this, and let's just say we also have 31 through 34, um, and it's going to be at 2 slash wherever the Mavericks ended, which was 459. We go to type, and now we're going to put in those elations that I mentioned before. So we have elation, and we'll go to the Cetra Pro, and there we are. And again, we'll go to the extended because we want those to be uh, as as big as we can get them. And what happened here was there was not enough room in the second universe to fit all of these elations. So what it did was it bumped the channel 32 into the third universe for us. And it actually ended up perfectly that 31 took up until the end of the second universe. And now 32, 33, and 34 are occupied in the third universe. I have had it happen where it just stopped. Um, recording because there was not enough room in those universes. Um, you know, I do believe it all depends on how many universes you have available to you. Um, the dongle I purchased only has 2 universes, so if I was not able to fit these in there, this probably would have just stopped, and it would not have patched 32 through 34, or there might have been a syntax error because again, there wouldn't be enough room to fit all of those in that universe. So again, once you have all of these patched into your show file, you can just go through and write these down on sheets or even on a sheet of paper, making sure it's nice and legible. My handwriting is atrocious, so I like to copy this into a nice sheets file so I can print it out and share it with other people. And then we go into hang, and we can address all of these fixtures really quickly. Um, so there is Fast Patch, a great little tool. Again, if you don't have this offline software, please get it. It's a fantastic tool to have. So what we're going to work on now is I'm going to show you how I typically make a spreadsheet file for when I'm going to start doing my electrics weights. I think I mentioned it during the gel inventory, the gel count section. I'm a big proponent for doing all of this online, but unfortunately I can't record these things online, so I'm going to make these in Excel. Um, when you're making these in sheets on Google Drive, these steps are going to be very similar. There are going to be a few differences, but not many. Um, uh, Probably the biggest difference is when you start making a VLOOKUP on sheets. There won't be any helpful tips that pop up like there should be on Excel, but I'm going to talk you through each step of the VLOOKUP. So hopefully you get an understanding of what it does and how to utilize it in your own Excel file. So this Excel file is a fairly simple setup. This whole file probably took me a little while to create in the first place, but now that I have it, I can just use it for every show file, every show that I'm going to be a master electrician for. So it comes in very handy, especially with a newer space or with a newer show. Setup is very simple. I have my title here, and then I have each individual electric labeled. One thing I did with my title is on each page. Um, if I were to change this title, it would change in other. It would change in all the other um, sheets as well. And I think that's just a little time saver. It doesn't have to be done, but it's just a little bit faster just to get that done. Um, Nice little feature. So then I have my instruments down here, the type of instruments, and this is uh, collected through a data validation, which is the first thing I'm going to show you. And then I have the weights here, which is done through that VLOOKUP that I mentioned before. The quantity here is just the quantity, how many of each instrument you have. And then I have the total weight of that group of instruments. And then down here, I have the total weight for the electric. And then below that, I have the total uh, weight in 1 inch bricks. In other words, how many 1 inch bricks are going to actually be put on that electric when we start the hanging process. One other thing I'd like to add down here, which I don't have on here, is that a 1 inch brick is equal to 15 pounds. Just so just so whoever's reading it is aware, and people can check that as well. If you are loading with mainly 2 inch bricks, then you can change that to a 2 inch brick equals, it would be about 30 pounds. I believe a 28 pounds to be exact. And then in here, you would just change that to uh, your total number divided by however many pounds that brick weighs. So that way, again, you know how many uh, bricks you need once you get into the space. Another thing I like to do here is I like to round this up um, to the nearest whole number because it's better actually to be a little bit uh, overweight when you are weighting these. And honestly, that's not going to change that number too much. So the first thing I'm going to show you on how to set up this file here is I'm going to show you how to make a data validation. So now I'm going to show you how to go about making a data validation. Um, excuse me. And the first thing you're going to want to do is you want to have a sheet with all of your information organized on it. This will help you also when you get to your VLOOKUPs. So you can see here I have all of my instruments in this column, and then I have these two are actually from an older project I just haven't gotten rid of. Um, and if I were to, it would mess up my formulas just a little bit. So I'm just going to leave it here for the time being. But you don't have to worry about those two. They won't be in your uh, file, of course. It'll just be instruments and weights. So again, this is probably the most important thing to have. Just a nice sheet to make things neat so you can have it tucked away and you can just reference this as needed. Um, so now you come over here to your first sheet where you want to put the formula. Then you're going to come up to data, and then you're going to go to data validations. And when you go to allow, you're going to go to list, and you'll see it has in-cell dropdown. When you go to source, you'll click that little arrow. They're going to go to where your uh, formula is, where all of your list data is, and then you click and drag for what you want it to be. I'm going to add in those extra little cells for when I want to add in some extra instruments. And then you just hit enter, and then you hit, and there's a drop down with all of your nice information. On sheets, it is going to be a little bit different. I believe with sheets, it'll pretty much automatically come up as a drop down for your data validations. But after that, it's pretty much the same process. When you want to select what um, sheet and what range you want it to be, there'll be a little square in the far right hand side of the cell, and it'll look like a spreadsheet. You click that, and then it'll bring you over to where you want to select your source. So you can see here we have the little upload symbol, but on sheets, instead of that, it'll be a small little square that looks like a group of cells. So that is data validations. So what I'm going to show you now is how to make a VLOOKUP. And this process is going to be uh, uh, practically the same on both Excel and Sheets. So the first thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to go to the column where you're going to want to start this VLOOKUP. And for me, in this case, it's going to be in the F column in row 8. And you start very simply by typing in equals VLOOKUP or VL, just so you can get that. Double click VLOOKUP. And the first thing you're going to put in is your search key. So the search key is what the formula is looking for. You're telling this to look here to see what information you're going to be pulling from. And in this case, it's going to be, in all your cases, when you're making a spreadsheet like this, it's going to be on your first sheet, and it's going to be your instruments. So it's going to be that data validation that we just made. So then you type in your comma, and you add in a space, and then you're going to type in the range. And as you can see, these down here are different from what I'm saying. These I pulled from, I believe, an older version of Excel, but they're basically the same thing. So what we're looking for now is the range, and this is going to be what is it looking up? Where is this going to look up the information? So in this case, we're going to go down to my tab entitled LX Instrument Weights. you want to select the whole thing. I'm also going to include the extra information, the extra columns down here from the data validation. Type in your comma and then space. And then what you're going to be looking for, what you're going to type in is your index. An index is where is this formula going to get the answer in that sheet. And you might have noticed when I clicked back to my first LX tab, it did put the first LX in the formula. If that happens, just delete that quickly. Um, so in this case, for the index, the where is it going to look for this information? It is in number format, numerical format. So because all of my weights are in the D column, it's the fourth column, I'm going to put 4, comma, then space, and then it's asking, in this formula, it's asking, is this information sorted? And typically it's asking, is this information sorted alphabetically, which this is not. So we are going to put false. We're going to close our parentheses, and we hit enter, and you can see that it just went to 0. In this case, we know it's working properly because all of my not availables have a weight of 0. So that way, when I type them into this spreadsheet, everything will zero out. So if we go to my source for ERS, and then we come down to my SpectraPsych, we can see this is working properly. So once you have all of your information correctly put in and you know that your formulas are going to work, what you can do is you can go ahead and copy and paste or click and drag to copy and paste all the way down in your data validations. When it comes to your VLOOKUP, however, you're going to have to be a little more careful, and this is where Excel and Sheets are going to differ. If you're working on Excel when you're doing these, again, it's okay if you do because you can still upload these to the drive. But again, on Sheets, it's just so much easier for you to be able to um, make changes and be able to view things a lot easier. So if you're working in Excel, the one thing you're going to have to make sure and do is before you click and drag or copy and paste, click and drag to copy and paste, excuse me, is you want to add in a $ before each uh, row and column value. So in this case, it's going to be your formula should read something like this or something similar depending on how big your formula area is. Your data values are spread out. So for me, it's going to be $A, $2 through $D, $20. And what that does is it's essentially telling Excel to keep those numbers the same throughout when you click and drag. Because if you don't keep them the same, it's going to start here with D20, and then here it's going to go through D21, here it's going to go through D22, and so on and so forth. And that's just going to mess it up the whole way through. So now, if when you click and drag, those numbers will always stay the same, but the first number is going to change, which is okay because you want that to be able to change. Because here we're looking at the info in E8, here E9, and so on and so forth. So the next thing you're going to want to put in is very simple. It's just going to be the quantity, how many of each fixture you have. And that's just any number, the number you counted up. So let's say we have 3 of whatever. We'll put that number in later. The next column we're going to make is our total column. And for that, we're going to go equals, parentheses, and we're going to go our VLOOKUP column times our quantity column, which should get 0. But as soon as we change this to a source for ERS, you'll see that our math goes through as well. And then down here, when we have our total sum, we're going to go equals. We're going to go equal sum, not plus sum, equal sum, excuse me. And then we just click and drag for all of our numbers here. We close parentheses, and then we can see it's 42. And for our last row here, for our number of 1-inch bricks, we're just going to go equals, and we want to say our total column divided by 15. You'll see we have 2.8. Again, I like to round that to the nearest whole number because it's better to be a little bit over than it's better to be a little bit over on your arbor side of things. Um, so here we'll have we can just go ahead and copy and paste, click and drag to go all the way down. And then once we start doing and adding in different instruments and whatnot, you'll see that those will um, everything will do its work for us in these formulas. So if you're coming, if when you open this for the first time in a few years, you're just going to want to go through and zero everything out on all of your pages. And that's obviously going to each instrument and clicking not available to start. And then just zeroing out your quantity. Unfortunately, I did not do that properly when I first made this. The next thing that I like to do with these is I like to add in this nice alternating colors scheme just so it can be easier read, especially when it's printed out. There are a couple ways to do that. You can do a format painter, or you can control click every other line and then make it that fill color. That's the way I typically do it, just because I'm not too comfortable with the format painter. So I just control click every other line after the fact. And then I make it that nice alternating color. I also add in the grid scheme, the grid lines from the beginning, and I also make sure that is present when I print these out. So that's a little bit about how to make a nice and easy um, weights calculation sheet that's going to do all the work for you. Again, making this the first time is going to be a little tedious, but once you have it done, you can just copy and paste into all of your sheets for however many electrics you have, and then again, you have it forever. Especially if you were to upload this to Google Drive, or if you're working in Sheets, you have this forever. Um, also when I'm working in Sheets, or even when I'm working on my home computer, I don't delete things. Um, I try not to delete things. I put things in what I call an archive folder. That way I have it with me at all times. I do the same thing on Google Drive. I have an archive folder where I don't delete things. That way I always have an older version just in case I need to go back to something. Obviously, once a couple years have passed, I do go through and I clear out my archive. But again, that's just a helpful little tip that I do, especially if you're going to be a master electrician. Maybe the first time out, you have some things that you can look back on. So I hope this tidbit has been helpful. I hope you have learned a few things with this weight calculations sheet. I do hope you put it into practice. And now we shall go on to handcart. What I'm going to show you now is how to make your handcarts. And I'm going to show you a sort of a simplified process, and I'm going to show you on my AP truss that I used for the Grapes of Wrath. So I'll show you how to do this for this one, and then the same process can be applied to the rest of your hang cards, and you can even do it all on one sheet layer when I get there. So the first thing you want to do is you want to make sure that the only classes you have showing up are your lighting classes. So this is, of course, in Vectorworks, and you want everything turned off in your classes besides your lighting. You want the set turned off. If you have architecture, turn that off. If you have seating in the set design drafting, you want that turned off. This is just so you can grab everything much, much easier. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to create a viewport around what you want to make your hang card out of. So to make a viewport, you're going to draw a nice rectangle around your area. Mine went a little far, but that's okay. I do believe you want to make sure it's filled in solid. And then you're going to come up here to view. They're going to go create viewport. If you are doing this for the first time, I do believe it is going to ask you if you want to use the selected area or something along those lines. You want to click yes and then make sure to do it for every time following, or do not ask me again, because it's always going to be the selected area, or use the geometry made, or use the symbol made. So once you have your create viewport menu up, you're going to want to go to new sheet layer, and then another window will pop up that's going to look like this. And you want to name this whatever you want it to be. I'm going to name this hang cards. I'm going to say OK. And you do want this to be in 1/2 inch scale. And then you hit OK. And that's very simply how you make a viewport. So what this is, this viewport that is going to open on my screen, is this is essentially a view that you have selected that you want to print off specifically. So you can do this as many times as you like. I like to get rid of little annotations down here. And to do that, you just double click your area. And the default action is to edit annotations. You hit OK. You'll see we're in the viewport. And you just hit delete, because that annotation is the first thing that comes up as selected. Then we exit viewport annotation. And you can see here's my AP truss. Excuse me. On this nice sheet layer. So the next thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to grab your ruler, because you want to make sure you have a ruler. So I'm going to go into my design layer again, which is our regular layer that has everything in it. And you can see it still has all of our lovely classes turned off. And I'm going to copy and paste my ruler from my plot into my hang card, because it is very important that you have a ruler in your hang card. So I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste that in. You can see that was a stupid thing to do. So instead, I'm going to viewport that in. And then once you have it in your design layer, your sheet layer, excuse me, you can copy and paste that as many times as you like. So let me just get back to my design layer here. So again, we're going to make a viewport for my ruler. We're going to say that. Again, we want it to be solid. We want to go to View, create Viewport. And this time we want it to be on the same sheet. So we're going to make sure it's on sheet 3, which is hang cards. We're going to click OK. And then that is going to viewport our ruler into this sheet layer for our hang cards. So now we can move this viewport around as much as we want, and we can get rid of our annotations. So now what you can do is you can move around your electric as needed, and you can make sure your center point on your ruler and your center point on here are actually lined up to be the same. So now what you're going to want to do is you want to go through and you want to add in a label for your stage left and your stage right view. You want to make sure and add in a center line. And then you want to make sure that your hang card is oriented in the way that it will be when people are handling these on stage. So what I like to do is I actually take my whole electric and I go to my rotate tool and I am going to rotate this 180 degrees. So now when people are standing behind this electric or behind this AP truss unit, they know exactly where these are going to go on the electric. So if I'm standing here, all right, let's say I'm standing where this 0 mark is, and this 0 mark is on stage directly behind this AP truss, then I know that all these LECOs over here are going to go to my right, and that the smaller group of LECOs are going to go over here to my left. And again, that's where your stage right and stage left markers are going to come in handy as well. So what I do is I put a nice big stage right up here, and then I put a stage left over here. And again, I make sure I have a center line marker because you want to hang from the center out to make sure that everything lines up as it should be as well. So again, you're going to go through and you're going to make all of your viewports, and you're going to put everything on this one sheet layer spaced out. And then what you're going to want to do is you want this to fit all on one page. And if you're lucky enough and you have a big plotter like we had out at Fredonia, or if you have a Staples or a printing place that has a big plotter, you'll be able to print this off all on one page. So what you want to do is you want to go to File, and you want to go to Page Setup, and then you want to go to Printer Setup. And I don't think I'm going to be able to select the paper size I would like. There we go. I can actually, because we're going to make this a PDF. So for me, it's going to be Adobe PDF. That way I can make it Arch C, so I know it's big enough to fit everything on it. Then we'll hit OK. And then you're just going to want to go through and space these out with all of your markings and everything on here, so that you can actually cut these out when you print it out. So once you have everything on here, once you have all of your electrics on here and everything printed off and everything nice and neat, you're going to print this off on your plotter or at your print store, and then you're going to cut these out. My recommendation is that you get an X-Acto knife and a ruler with some cork backing on it, so that way it can stay, the sheet can stay put when you're cutting, and you make sure to have a cutting board with it. And then what you're going to need again is you're going to need some foam core, some poster board, and use the same system there, except you're going to want some kind of a box cutter to be able to cut that foam core out, and you'll be able to use that. So that's a little bit about hang cards and how to make them. I do have an older completed hang card file that I can show you, just so you get a better idea of what this is all going to look like when it's all completed and all done. Up here on my screen now is a completed version of a set of hang cards I made uh, when we were doing when I was the master electrician for the Fraternity Dance Ensemble uh, a couple years ago. So as you can see here, this has all of my pretty much all of my electrics view ported onto this one sheet. They're spread out, so I could fit everything on one sheet and make it as economic as possible, so I'm not wasting paper. Um, and like I mentioned, when I would print this out, I would cut everything out with an X-Acto knife, and I would glue this to some foam core that could be handed out to different people to facilitate hanging the actual plot itself. So we'll zoom in here on my first electric, and you can see I have my ruler here, and then I have my nice center line, and then I have my stage left and stage right labels, and I have clearly marked what electric this is. And again, when you're holding this in your hand, if you're holding this with the CL towards you and you're just holding this in your hand and you're standing on stage, this is the stage right and this would be the stage left. Um, again, this is rotated from where it would be on the actual plot itself, just to make it a little bit easier for people to see and really understand where exactly these lights are going to be hung on the electric. So if we come over here, we say I also included my box booms on this section of hang cards, and then we come to the key. This key here is the actual key from the plot. What I did was I went and I viewported this out into this sheet of hang cards as well. So again, that would be cut out, and this would be placed on the opposite side of where the electrics would be. Just so people who are in the hang process who might not know what they're looking for, they can flip the card over and be like, oh, this symbol means this. Um, One quick note as you're going through this, if you have anything like this where the pipe isn't showing up, make sure you go through and you change that. Typically, a good way to change that is to click on the viewport, and then over in your object info bar, which is on my main screen of my two-screen setup, you can go to a classes option in the object info, and then you'll see it here. I'm not sure what class needs to be turned on because this plot is a little older, but I'm going to try Electrics Hidden, and we'll see if that brings that back up. And other times, there it is. So just make sure that you understand what classes need to be on or maybe turned off so that, again, this can be as nice and neat as possible. So once you have your hang cards, completed, whether it be with this system that I have shown you or with a completely different system. You're going to go ahead and print these out, and again, you're going to be placing these. You're going to cut these out and then gluing them or sticking them somehow to that foam core and then cutting out the foam core to be handed out on the day of hang if you want to go this route. Of course, there are many different routes that you can go. I have seen, I think I mentioned in the intro video, I have seen a lot of different options. This is always just my way of doing things, just because I've seen it done this way, and I liked how this was done. If you have seen things done differently, then by all means, that is completely okay to do things your way. Again, this is just how I have seen things done and how I've gotten to. This is how I've gotten used to doing things.
Well, hello again, everybody, and I really do want to thank everybody that ended up staying throughout the whole video. I know this video ended up being a bit on the longer side, but I really do hope you guys have learned a few things from this video. I really did have a lot of fun making it, so I really do hope you guys did enjoy it. I hope you did learn a few helpful tips and tricks here and there, and you can apply it to being a master electrician, a head electrician, or maybe you can even help out when you are an assistant master electrician or an assistant head electrician. Um, One thing I did want to talk about real quick before I wrap up the video completely is emails. Um, emails are a very important part of being a head electrician, master electrician, again, whatever you guys are calling it now, whatever you might call it for your theater. Again, they're a very important part of the process. They're how you're going to communicate most of the time with your crews. Um, it's very important to format your emails, especially when you're going to have a lot of information in them. Um, what I have learned from colleagues of mine when I was back at Fredonia is split up your information. So if you're going to be talking, if you're sending out an email with a bunch of people on it, split up your information for your different groups. So if you're sending one out to your electrics majors and your electrics crew, start with, do your crew first and do like a header, in bold, say LX crew, colon, all the information for them. And then, new line, and then bold LX majors, all the information for them, and so on and so forth. Um, you definitely want to bold any call times and dates just so it sticks out a little bit more. And any important information. If your meeting place is changing, bold that as well. For the first couple times, bold where you are meeting, just so that information sticks out. Um, it's in this industry, we're all about honestly, we're all about getting to the information faster. It's getting that information out faster. So if you have headings, the people who are reading your emails will be able to say, okay, I'm LX crew, this is my information, or I'm an LX major, where's my information in this email. So just be careful about how you're typing out your emails, how you're formatting your emails. In your subject line, you always want to do the show first. So, like if we were doing the Grapes of Wrath right now and I was the Emmy, it would be the Grapes of Wrath hyphen whatever I'm talking about. Um, I know we didn't talk about Emmy reports either. I don't know uh, how many companies, how many production companies or theater groups use Emmy reports. I know that at Fredonia we used them a lot, and I think they were a great help. Um, that's something I didn't cover in this video, but they're a handy little tool. And I have my template that I made um, based off of somebody else's Emmy report. I made that my first full Emmy position. And that's what I've been using just because I've gotten so used to it and I really like my layout. Um, if anybody wants to see that, if any of my friends are actually watching this and you want to take a look at my Emmy report template, shoot me a Facebook message, shoot me an email. It's completely okay. If anybody out there watching this, maybe you're an aspiring master electrician, or maybe you're an electrician who wants to be an ME one day, and you need to know more about ME reports. Go ahead and shoot me an email. I'm always looking to help people, which is why I'm doing this. Again, this was um, mainly for my friends who are missing out on these experiences. um, it's hopefully it's going to help them in some way, especially with if the schools transition to more distance learning in the fall. At this point, with everything going on, when I'm filming this, the schools are just finishing up their spring semester in 2020, and we don't know what's going to be going on in the fall of 2020. So, if schools again do distance learning, then a lot of my theater friends are going to be missing out on some of these experiences again. So I really think this video and shared experiences from the past are really going to come in handy. Um, Again, I don't know what's going to be going on in the fall. I don't know. Nobody really knows. So, if anybody is watching this to learn a few things about being an ME, and maybe you haven't had any experience, I hope this has been helpful. Um, for anybody that is an ME and maybe wondering if there's things you could do better or things you need to improve on, I hope this has helped. The in the grand scheme of things, I really hope this has helped in some, uh, in some fashion. Um, I think that's pretty much everything I want to cover. And forgive my face if I have like a blank stare on my face for a second here. I'm just trying to make sure I've gone over everything. Um, that's pretty much it. So again, I really do hope for those of you who have stuck it out throughout the whole thing, or maybe just skipped through to certain sections, I really do hope you have learned something here. Again, this is here for you guys to learn. Feel free to share this with whomever you want to. Watch it as many times as you need to, of course. Um, again, this is here to help, and I hope it has helped. So that's it for now, and we'll catch you later. Bye.